bringing the Growth and Natural Resources Committee meeting to order. Thanks everyone for being here. We have 3 items on the agenda today. First is to finish our conversation about litter and litter pollution strategies for the city. And then second, we are going to talk about tree protection and plantings, both what we currently do and opportunities for improvement in the city. And then finally on the agenda is the rezoning case on Nall Road. We don't expect to have enough time to cover that case today, so if anyone is here for that rezoning case, I would recommend that you come back if you can. Apologies if you didn't hear that before, but I am going to make a motion to our committee that we hear the Nall rezoning case at our GNR meeting on August 27th. All in favor?
So Chair, can I make a couple of suggestions in your motion? So you may want to include to your motion for the clerk's report a recommendation that the council continue the hearing on July 2nd, from July 2nd to either the first or second meeting in September, depending on the council's or the committee's recommendation.
So moved.
So that's in the first meeting?
The first meeting of September, yeah.
Okay.
September 2nd.
Yes.
So instead of July 2nd, September 2nd.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, September 3rd.
Oh, is it September 3? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so then the public hearing would move to September 3rd. That would be a recommendation to go back to council at our next meeting. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think where everything falls out in the agenda order, this was in the afternoon, and you'll probably get to public hearings before you get to committee reports. Is that right? I'm trying to remember. If you do, it's fine. You just handle it either way. I don't know which order it's going to come in on the agenda, but your motion's fine regardless.
Okay. Do I have a second for that motion? Second. All in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. We will move to our first item, again, finishing our discussion on litter pollution, litter prevention strategies.
So as we have staff come to the podium, I will just give a couple of introductory comments. I will note for the public, particularly that is reviewing the attachment in board docs, this is precisely the same presentation that was included on May 28th. So there is a part towards the end of this that includes remarks from NCDOT. You all did have the opportunity to hear from NCDOT at the last meeting. So outside of that, this presentation will be in place, and I believe Charles Craig is kicking us off from Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources.
Good afternoon, everyone, and to the chair and members of the Growth and Natural Resources Committee. I am Charles Craig, the Assistant Director for Raleigh Parks, and I'm excited to talk to you about some of the efforts that we are taking within the Raleigh Parks lens as we approach litter and litter cleanup. With that being said, I want to take a moment and just kind of highlight some of our staff that's here to help put this presentation together. And also, I consider them the experts in the room. I believe that we have some of the best staff in the whole state of North Carolina working for Raleigh Parks. First person I want to introduce to everyone, I want to ask that as I call your name, you just stand and wave to everyone, will be our Superintendent of Infrastructure. This person, his name is Brian Johnson. Brian is responsible for one of our units, such as Greenways, which I will talk about today. The next person I want to touch on is our Superintendent of Engagement. This is Deshae Blake. Deshae is responsible for our refuse team, which I will touch on today as well. And then the third person I want to highlight is our Superintendent of Grounds and Operations for all of our district crews. His name is Michael DeGrossa, which is standing at this time. We have a great and a strong, robust, healthy volunteer program. Our volunteer coordinator manager, her name is Mary Owens. Mary is not with us today due to a conference that she is attending, but one of her amazing staff members decided to show up, and her name is Olinda. Please stand at this time so everyone will know who you are. Thank you to our amazing staff that's here that can answer any questions. If we go into major details that's out of my scope, I see them as the experts in the room. So let's get started. As we talk about Raleigh Parks and we look at the approach to litter and trash removal from a Raleigh Parks lens, it's divided into two categories. Category number one is our staff support. Once we look at staff support, it's once again broken down into three layers. Number one will be our Greenway team. Number two is our refuse team, or our municipal solid waste team, also known as refuse. And then thirdly, it will be our parks maintenance team. Then we will look at our volunteer support staff. We have some of the best volunteers ever. Our volunteers are so amazing. We can't do all the things that we do without the support of our volunteers. We look at the number of events that we're able to host from a volunteer standpoint, the number of volunteers each year, and the number of hours our volunteers give to this great city of Raleigh. So let's continue. As we look at greenways and litter and trash removal within our greenway system, I definitely want to put some emphasis on the photos. These photos are not Photoshop. They are the real deal. We produce a lot of trash within our park spaces and greenways. And when I see this, I don't see this as a bad thing or error. I see this as memories being made, birthday parties, events, and a whole bunch of great activities taking place and people coming together to have a fabulous time. And when they do that, they generate a lot of trash. But with that being said, within our greenways, we have 192 trash cans that are serviced weekly. Some of these locations are serviced twice a week, depending on the volume of trash and how many people are utilizing those certain spaces. The trash cans will fill up very quickly. We have a staggering number of 25,000 trash bags that we're able to use each year around litter pickup and trash just on our greenways alone. Some of our higher traffic areas, such as lakes and loop trails and the canoe launch, these areas are super popular. People come out all the time, and we're happy to be able to host them, but they also generate a lot of trash. One of the factors that continues to trend in the area of needing more support is illegal dumping, and the unsheltered community continues to trend high with a lot of trash. With that being said, our staff, we're able to collect, just from our greenways alone, 254 tons of trash litter annually. Next, I'm going to talk to you about our Raleigh Parks Municipal Solid Waste Team, or our refuse team. Within our Raleigh Parks spaces, we have 1,131 trash cans scattered all across the city within our park spaces. These trash cans are serviced daily, some are serviced weekly, and then some are serviced 3 times a week, depending on the volume and how many people are utilizing that certain space, and how fast we need to change that trash bag. With that being said, we're able to collect 887 tons each year just from trash alone within our park spaces. High impact areas is the unsheltered community, once again. Playgrounds, dog parks generate a lot of trash, and it's smelly trash too. And yeah, it's true. Basketball courts, special events, rentals, and believe it or not, food distribution produce a lot of trash, and we try our best to serve the citizens of Raleigh and try to clean up as soon as possible. With that being said, I want to quickly move on to our districts. We have a fabulous district setup. Our park system is divided up into 6 districts from our park maintenance lens. Each district has a collection of around 155 garbage cans per district. I will be remiss if I didn't say that illegal dumping was not an issue. It is. We have 104 tons of illegal dumping across the city. But for right now, our 2 main areas that we can find illegal dumping is Southeast Raleigh and Northeast Raleigh. It is trending very high in those areas of illegal dumping, where we have to dispatch staff to clean up over 104 tons of illegal dumping each year. With that being said, we do use a work order system with our staff. We was able to generate over 6,000 work orders for litter cleanup alone. That means that once staff is dispatched to a location, to a park, they are there to service that park. For example, they're doing a park inspection. and they see trash in the parking lot. They're able to pull out their smartphone, pull up their CityWorks, click on, I picked up trash, I did an inspection, I watered the trees, closed that work order, and we're able to capture that in real time. We had over 6,000 of those work orders alone last year just for litter pickup. High impact parks, and I do want to touch on our downtown area is continuing to trend very high with a lot of litter. Moore Square, we have roughly 360 standard work orders that we are basically at Moore Square almost every day, which is pretty standard. The challenge is we're able to go and service Moore Square, and then within a couple hours or by the end of the day, it looks like we haven't been there. So what that means is we are called back. So we have received over 260 callback work orders just to service Moore Square to give that additional attention. We're very thankful that we are able to kind of move forward with FY25 in addressing some of these issues through the through the budget that was now approved to be able to support our downtown corridor. And then lastly, I want to take a moment and just celebrate our volunteers and thank our volunteers for their support. I think I shared this already, but we have some of the best volunteers in the whole state of North Carolina. They come and volunteer right here in the heart of Raleigh. And we're so thankful for Raleigh Parks to be able to be an avenue for citizens to give back and create these exceptional experiences where they're able to come back, not just once or twice, but we have some volunteers that volunteer with us multiple times, year after year, and we're very thankful for them. I'm going to go through this graph very quickly. As you look at the FY23 in the middle, that will be our last year. We are currently in FY24. These numbers are up to April 30th. So with that being said, the number of litter events that we was able to produce last year, FY24, was 408 events. This year, up to April 30th, we will continue to trend, but it was 337 events. The number of events are less, but the impact is even greater in FY24. So let's go deeper. As we look at the pounds of trash collected in FY23, it was 25,000, almost 26,000 pounds of litter trash collected just from the hands of volunteers, and we're very thankful for that. For FY24 up to April 30th, we have surpassed that, and we are at 37,000 pounds of litter collected just through the hands of volunteers, and we appreciate them. The hours giving in FY23 was 4,777 hours. For this year, FY24, very, very thankful. Over 5,435 hours giving from volunteers supporting our park system, and we say thank you. From the value and monetary value standpoint, our volunteers are amazing. They're able to give their time that is able to be quantified into dollars, so we appreciate them. Lastly, as we look at the number of volunteers, FY23, we had 2,200 volunteers. I truly believe in FY24, our current year, some of those volunteers from FY23, they came on back. And when they came back, they brought a friend. So we're at 2,496 volunteers just for FY24 up to April 30th. And we are continuing to host events even now. So thank you to all of our volunteers. And those are some of the efforts at a high level that we are doing within Raleigh Parks. At this time, I'm going to pass it over to my colleagues in Stormwater Engineering Services.
So Heather Dutra will be coming to the podium, and I will let you know that Charles will still stay close by. We know you had requested some information about JC Park. That will be included in the solid waste part of the presentation, but Charles will be close. If there are any questions, he can answer once we get there. And Heather will take it.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Heather Dutra. I oversee our water quality section with Raleigh Stormwater and Engineering Services. And I, too, am really excited to share with you some of our litter initiatives on how we keep trash out of our streams and our stormwater devices. Now, some of our initiatives are driven by our permit requirements, which require us to address pollutants, including litter. And then some of our initiatives are proactive and collaborative with our community partners and our internal other departments here at the city for creative solutions to tackle litter. So the first slide really is just to highlight some of our community engagement initiatives over the past 4 years. The first 3 bullets really address our stormwater volunteer programs, which include Adopt a Stream, Foster a Stream, which includes our pop-up stream cleanup events, and storm drain marking. So similar to parks, volunteers are very important to us. We had over 7,000 volunteer hours donated, and that was equivalent to over 86,000 pounds of trash removed from our streams during that time, and over 3,500 storm drain markers installed, which help educate the community that only rain goes down our storm drains. We also have a full-time stormwater educator on staff as well, and that person conducts in-person classroom visits. They also table at public events and other community events. So this number really just reflects the students that this educator and our other staff members reached over the past couple of years. Over 8,000 students that received stormwater education, which also included litter prevention. And then we also partner with the Clean Water Education Partnership. This is a really important partnership to us because they can expand our reach. They also have targeted Spanish-speaking language efforts. And through their litter campaign, their mass media campaign for litter, alone in Raleigh, they had over 3 million impressions. So they really help expand our reach in this area as well. You can see we have an internal Power BI dashboard, which helps us track to see how our volunteer programs are growing and progressing over time. We also have online these interactive maps where people can see these streams that have been adopted by our volunteers, when they were last cleaned, and how much trash was removed. We have thousands of regulatory stormwater devices that require annual inspection. As part of the city's oversight of these inspections, trash must be removed from these stormwater devices. And we also work with our transportation field services colleagues to perform catch basin cleaning and street sweeping, which further reduces trash that reaches our streams. Beyond our regulatory requirements, we have ongoing watershed studies that help us to collect and conduct stream condition assessment. We've recently added data collection on trash hotspots to allow us to better inform our education, outreach, and community collaborations. Speaking of collaborating with our community partners, just wanted to highlight some of the guests that we had last time here, and that included Sound Rivers, NC State University, and the Great Raleigh Cleanup. We partnered with Sound Rivers. They deployed an in-stream trash collector device in Little Rock Creek in the Walnut Creek Wetland Park. And that was such a success that with city support, we are expanding that program. So we are entering into a contract to add additional in-stream trash collection devices in other areas of the city as well. And we also recently worked with NC State University and other partners on a litter study proposal for Marsh Creek. And we are hopeful that that will be funded so we can learn a little bit more about litter reduction behavior, as well as deploying some of these in-stream trash collection devices in Marsh Creek watershed. So looking ahead, again, we're excited about the in-stream trash collector expansion. We recently worked with many of our other city departments on the Great Raleigh Cleanup Workforce Development Program, where we will be supporting the Great Raleigh Cleanup and those experiencing homelessness to help us with this community concern of litter. If our litter study with NC State and other partners is funded, that will align with our Marsh Creek watershed study and help us better inform with data our outreach, education, and volunteer engagement in those areas. And we're continuously trying to improve our maintenance of stormwater control measures, our stormwater devices. And thank you for recently approving the GSI maintenance crew, where we hope that that team will help us not only maintain our GSI devices, but keep trash out of our SCMs to a greater extent. And I think I'm passing off now to our Solid Waste Services Department. Thank you.
So Stan Joseph, our Solid Waste Department Director, and he's a guy that knows how to talk trash, so.
Good afternoon, everyone, committee members, board members. Stan Joseph, Solid Waste Services, here to give our portion of the litter initiative. Just for context, these are the services that we provide generally. These are our core services. We service over 125,000 households and in the city of Raleigh. This gives you a little bit of a summary of the amount of volume that we collect. So annually in '23, we collected approximately 142,000 tons of material. I don't want to call it all garbage because we processed 26,000 tons of it at our partner processor, Sunoco. So, this is an acronym that isn't often used, but I learned it when I got to the city of Raleigh. And honestly, what it is the community looking out for things that may deteriorate or distract from the beauty of our city. And so we get these requests from a variety of places. It could be just a resident that is calling. RPD drives by something and they see something. And what we do is we put it into our system and we try to get it cleaned up. Now, I will say there's some caveats here regarding private property, regarding move out of a multifamily and those sort of things that we have to investigate first prior to doing that or notifying the owner of the property. Illegal dumping, I think I covered this already. And just so you have an idea of how many of these that we collect, last month I think we did about 30. So on average about 27 to 30 of these. Convenience sites. The original purpose of convenience sites many, many years ago was prior to curbside programs. And so people wanted and asked for a location where they wanted to recycling before recycling was super popular. And so we started, Wake County and the city of Raleigh, mostly Wake County, started setting up convenience sites for that purpose. And of course, you know, you've got your municipalities and then you've got your areas outside of the municipalities that fall in the county. And this particular site, and I'll talk a little bit more about it, we've closed a couple lately. You guys are aware that we closed J.C. Park. And J.C. Park was a long-standing effort to make it work, I guess you would say. When I first got here, I heard about J.C. Park, did a site visit. Again, the original intent was, you know, to provide our residents an opportunity to recycle. But, you know, that was many years ago. Now we have a curbside program. And what we noticed about J.C. Park is a couple things. It's located right next to one of our parks. And there was just incredible amount of public and illegal dumping there. We also noticed that there were a lot of commercial entities that were utilizing J.C. Park because you could tell by the stacks and the things that were brought in. I think complaints were nothing new, but it seemed like the complaints of residents saying that this look outside of one of our parks is horrible and the city needed to do something about it. We started first with just putting up some new signs about fines for illegal dumping. Then we moved a little bit into asking RPD to patrol the areas. It's not a closed area, so, you know, the access was kind of in and out. And then we finally put up some cameras to identify when that was happening. After reviewing the cameras, a couple people got tickets, but honestly, it was not resolving the issue. So we went ahead and moved on to closing that site with council approval. And yeah, so now the park has that space back to do with it what they would like. I know there might be some questions about that. Feel free to ask. The second location that we closed was Triangle Restore, and that was 100% a request from the customer who owns the Restore or the business, and they were suffering from the same issue of not being able to manage cleaning it up all the time because people were just throwing bags there, not recyclables all the time, garbage. And it was private property, and we had set that up many years back just to, again, support the recycling efforts. And they asked us to move it out. So we did. These are some other support efforts we do when it comes to litter. A lot of solid waste practices and support is outside of our core business. We handle special events, city-sponsored events. Basically, anytime people call or if there's something that we can do, we like to help. There's some boundaries we've got to draw around that because we're really not funded for those things. Our funding comes from the enterprise fund, which comes from our residents who pay a set fee for us to collect their garbage, recycling, and yard waste. But we do what we can in that we have to support other things. And there's quite a bit that we do. We did partner with the Great Raleigh Cleanup and still continues to do so. We actually gave some money to that effort as well because that's helping everyone in this community. So super supportive of that. So solutions moving forward. I think we have a great partnership with Wake County. They have over 11 convenience centers and some hazardous waste locations, because I'll tell you right now that it's not just garbage that's being dumped at these convenience centers. I've seen it myself. There are tires, there are batteries, now lithium batteries, oil, paint, just a lot of things. And you can't just throw that in there with it. So then it becomes a utilization of resources to constantly police and clean that up. We also have, I hope you all have this on your phone, Raleigh Reuse. And by the way, look, stay tuned. There's going to be a couple of versions of it coming out as we get feedback and add to it. But this is a way really for robust communication with our residents and people who participate in this new app. It's a great conduit for us to push out information about lots of things. I was on it the other day trying to test out if I could figure out an item that wasn't on there that they could tell us to where it would go, whether it goes in the garbage or goes in recycling or yard waste and those sort of things. So, and it's also a great educational tool. And I'll reiterate what I always say about education, because I think that's a big part of it. People understanding where our resources are, where the facilities are, what do I do with this? I think that's all. I think we need to maintain our focus there. However, I will say, and education, any educational component is exponentially more successful with some level of enforcement component. So I'll take any questions.
Do we have any more presentations?
You can hold questions to the end, or you can go as you wish. We still have transportation has a short presentation as well. Okay, so we have Steve Halsey, Assistant Director in Transportation. So again, you heard from NCDOT last month. We know that there was interest in understanding street side debris. And so Department of Transportation will talk about their efforts.
Thank you, Tansy. Steve Halsey with Transportation. Just wanted to talk a little bit about transportation's initiatives related to litter. As Tansy said, you heard from Brandon Jones, who's a big partner with NCDOT and their efforts along with roadside litter. Great partnership that we have. So as far as the maintenance programs, our right-of-way mowing teams remove litter monthly within the mowing areas, which account for about 395 landscaped areas within the city. You can see the areas highlighted in green in the map on the right-hand side of the screen. In addition to those monthly litter removals, our goal as a city is to sweep all city streets twice per year. In addition to these scheduled programs, our maintenance teams regularly respond to illicit dumping and perform inspections on what we consider to be about 230 trouble spots throughout the city and try and clear those areas of litter and debris as we find them or as they're reported to us. Finally, our downtown services team, which many of you are familiar with, patrol the 110 block municipal service district twice daily and remove any litter that they find while they're on patrol. So looking at some of the data for fiscal year '24, we collected 4,350 bags approximately of litter within those 395 acres that we mow. We have swept approximately 4,400 curb miles of city streets. Going back to the illicit dumping, we performed 924 inspections of those trouble spot areas and found 119 locations that needed clearing, which resulted in about 120 tons, if you can believe that, of litter and debris removed from the rights-of-way. The pictures pretty much give you an idea of what we see in some of these trouble spot areas that are typically isolated from other parts of, or visible from other parts of the right-of-way. For our downtown services team, we estimate that they patrolled approximately 20,000 miles over the course of FY24 and collected about 5,500 bags of litter during those patrols of the downtown area. We currently support 2 volunteer programs in transportation, the first of which is the Adopt a Shelter program that is managed by our transit division. The Adopt a Shelter program provides businesses, individuals, or other organizations the opportunity to adopt a shelter and provide monthly litter removal and cleanup around that shelter. In addition to that, our downtown services team annually has provided a day of service in partnership with Activate Good. We've had 6 events since 2018 and estimate about 300 volunteers have collected about 200 bags of litter through those volunteer programs. So I think as far as the transportation is concerned, that's pretty much all we had. Going back to what you heard last time, our partnership with NCDOT and their programs are pretty significant for most of the major corridors that you see in Raleigh. I think there we go, there's a pretty good map, I think, that highlights some of their programs with Sponsor a Highway, Adopt a Highway, and city and NCDOT maintain roads within the city limits included within the presentation that you guys can probably take a closer look at. But other than that, if anybody has any questions for me or anyone else, I think we're available to answer them. Thank you.
All right, I just want to thank all staff from various departments for providing this information. It really helps, I think, for council to be up to date on all of your great work. I want to note that we didn't have time for council discussion on this topic at our last meeting, so I want to ensure that we 3 get to discuss some of what we've heard. I also want to note that Councilmember Black is excused from the committee meeting today. So I've just got a couple items I want to note and a few questions. First, again, just thank you for all the work that you do. 887 tons of garbage being picked up at our parks. So 887 multiplied by 2,000, that's your number of pounds. And then 100,000 tons of garbage being picked up by solid waste services each year. And that comes from all of us. So I just want to say again, thank you. Thank you for what you do. I'm really excited to hear that we're going to be expanding the in-stream trash devices. So that was something I had a question about. They seem like they've been really effective. So excited to see that partnership continue with Sound Rivers. I also want to give a plug for the recycling trash game that's now on our website, or you can get an app. It will tell you, you cannot recycle a used pizza box. You cannot recycle a plastic flower pot. But these are the kind of things a lot of people think, yeah, I should just put that in the recycling. No, that raises our costs, that contaminates our recycling processes, and I'm really excited to get that message out so that we can recycle a little bit better. So I'll just name my questions. I'm not sure who would be the right person to answer. I think the first one, maybe my overall question, is how can we increase our marketing and messaging around not littering, not polluting, about recycling, and I'm thinking about that, both with kind of public information campaigns as well as more cultural ways to get involved, to think about that? For example, through public art, art sculptures made of trash, any ways that we get people just to think a little bit more about these topics. So that's my first question. I know we're already doing a lot, but I just wonder, is there more we can do in that space? I'm also familiar with some apartments or multifamily complexes that don't allow, for example, all of what can be recycled to be recycled. So I guess that would be a question to Stan. Do we actually service all of the multiplexes, or do they sometimes have their own, I don't know, companies or services? Because I have heard that they'll say you can only recycle cardboard, for example.
Yeah, the answer to all of those questions is yes. All of that happens. So we do provide some service upon request for cardboard dumpsters to some multifamily locations. Some multifamily locations already have a contract and choose to just stay with a private sector vendor. Most of the garbage that's picked up in dumpsters at multifamilies are private companies that do that. We don't really pick up any of those. There's a couple carts in some areas that we've picked up for a bunch of years. I think we're still picking them up, but we'll probably get out of that business eventually.
Okay, that helps. Yeah, I was just curious because I think there is some difference in what people are able to recycle depending on where they live. And then the last question while you're there, Stan, is about the J.C. Park Convenience Center. So I wonder, can you speak to the Downtown Cary Center and how have they been able to keep that open and not have some of the similar issues? Or perhaps they do, and I just am not aware.
Yeah, I actually reached out to my colleague over at Cary yesterday, and we had a little chat about it. I will say that you are correct. They do have some of the same issues that we have, but it is a closed and manned site, and that always makes a difference. With that comes resources and costs. They operate 6 days a week. They have the private sector that actually hauls the containers off to either the landfill or recycling or wherever. That contract runs them about $400,000 a year. And that includes one person to man the site, which really they don't do anything other than direct customers as they come in. One of my questions to him is, how do you know it's just the city of Cary that is bringing that stuff? And one of the responsibilities of that person there is to check driver's license and verify that it is that location. In addition to that, Cary also provides one of their employees to supplement that so they can work 6 days a week, so they kind of stagger their shifts on busy times and those sort of things. I did not include the cost to Cary for that additional person as well. There was another question in there, I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, I was just curious, again, how do they kind of prevent the illegal dumping
Yeah.
issue? I mean, it sounds like having someone there makes a big difference.
100% makes a
Yeah.
big difference, but it doesn't solve the problem completely. They shut their gates at 6 and they close the gates so no one can go in and go out. But much like our convenience sites or convenience sites all over the place, when people want to dump something and, at 6:30 somebody shows up, they're not going taking it back home. They're going to leave it by the gate, and then so that's additional resources to clean those things up. They also get hazardous material at that site, and it's usually not brought in during working hours.
Okay, thanks for especially providing that cost information. That's helpful. Other questions or comments from council members?
Yeah, I just a couple questions, and they may be for Stan, they may not. Actually, a lot of them for parks. But my first question for everyone: we have a lot of departments doing a lot of things about picking up trash. If a resident is having an issue or whatever, they just call, then our staff coordinates out. But who's coordinating all of these different trash so we're not because what I'm seeing is possibly duplication, which impacts service because it's who's on first? Whose is it? Is it on the greenway? Is it just 2 feet off the greenway where then it's the trash, solid waste? Who's coordinating all of this?
It's a good question, and I'll take a first stab at it and then invite staff to share additional perspective to that. Ultimately, I think there are very good relationships among the staff. We do have some limited web tools to help people make service requests and direct it, and it's got some workflow opportunities in our online system. We are, I think, as the council is aware, in our strategic plan, we will be implementing a customer relationship management system that will hopefully coordinate even greater sort of that identification of issues and the routing to the appropriate staff. I think our goal is hopefully within the next year to have that completely designed and start to implement all of those workflows and escalation. I do want to acknowledge that particularly the transportation department, and this was in the presentation, it does sound like a lot of moving parts and pieces, and there are a lot of people working on these efforts. Transportation does do much of the litter removal on behalf of stormwater, so you heard from stormwater, but that very much is a partnership between stormwater and transportation in terms of that service. And you had a specific question in terms of the interface between greenways and transportation. And I'll invite either Steve or Charles to speak to that, but I imagine that really is just good communication between the staff to make sure that they are coordinating.
I didn't know if he was coming. I was going to slide the mic up or not, but we'll keep it down here. Yes, communication and great partnership. A lot of times if we receive a request or ServiceNow request, we would dispatch staff to investigate. Once we understand those boundary lines, if it's in our scope within parks, we're going to take care of it. We need support or bigger equipment, we're going to reach out to transportation if it's outside of our scope. But ideally, we want to respond to it as soon as possible. We'll check and see if there's a safety hazard or a safety concern, which will turn into a top priority, and we'll try to make that happen as soon as possible. Steve, did I leave out anything?
I think that pretty much covers it, Charles. It's communication, so, most anything that comes in that's in the right-of-way is going to start with transportation. If we need to, as Charles alluded to, pull in partners, whether it's NCDOT, Parks and Rec, Solid Waste, certainly we do that. I think the biggest, as he alluded to, key is just making sure that if there's a safety issue, we resolve it as quickly as we can without having to your point, pass the buck one way or the other.
Okay. Thank you. My last two questions is, one is about enforcement around, I guess, our businesses. Because, we talk about the Greenway and we're talking about roads, but we have around some of our gas stations and things of that nature, trash. I'm assuming that's transportation who then kind of works, but I'm assuming zoning first goes out and says, hey, you need to clean it up. How is that part coordinated? And my second question, I know is for Charles. You mentioned the northeast and southeast areas where you're seeing a lot of illegal dumping. My question is, could that correlation be because you have a lot of more parks in those areas compared to the other parts of the city?
Which one you want? I'll go real quick. So just from the enforcement perspective, we do bring in housing and neighborhoods and zoning from time to time if it's a private property issue. Also work with the illicit discharge program and stormwater if that happens to be applicable and whatever the case might be. But there are partners for those, I guess, non-right-of-way or non-city or Raleigh properties, if that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
So we do have a lot of parks within the southeast Raleigh and northeast Raleigh side of Raleigh. However, there's a lot of hiding spots as well. Little side roads or little cutout dead ends, and they're nice little getaways. So you can dump something and get away pretty fast. And also the level of accountability possibly from neighbors, kind of giving people the mean looks are not there. So we have some people that come back and they repeat with dumping, and then our staff is dispatched to clean it up in a timely manner, and then they come back and do it again. Sure. The education behind it, we put up signage, we try, but a lot of times when I have found when some people have made up their mind that they're just going to do it, it's really hard to catch them in the act, number one, and then number two, stop them from doing it because they keep doing it. So that's, I think, why we're trending in that area without having true data to kind of back it up. That's my opinion.
Okay, I'm sorry, my very last question is, between Councilor Patton and I, we have a lot of donut holes. So we have areas that is really not in the city limits, but if you turn around the corner, you're in the city limits. How are you dealing with trash when, you know, our residents are calling us, but it may not exactly be within the city limits of Raleigh?
That's a great question. Depending on where it's located, it sounds like that will probably fall more so with your team with transportation. So I'm gonna yield that over to transportation from a Wake County standpoint.
Yeah, and it'd go back to that partnership with NCDOT again. If it's an NCDOT road and there's something that we can reach out to them for help with, that'd be who we would lean on in those types of situations most heavily.
Yeah, just a couple for me too. I would say to piggyback off of Councilmember Branch's question, he asked how do y'all coordinate internally. From a resident experience standpoint, obviously residents probably don't all have like a super nuanced understanding of which type, like who maintains the road that they're on or where's the public right of way versus private property. From a resident standpoint, what's the best and most efficient thing they can do to report litter and illegal dumping activities that they see? Is See-Click-Fix the best option for them, or is there some other avenue?
There are items on See-Click-Fix, and I think ultimately there's also an other category in See-Click-Fix for somebody that isn't clear what of those categories that is available. The city does have on its website a list of frequently called numbers, and there's some explanation. That is an area that we're really studying as a part of the CRM customer experience team to how to optimize that. I will say I think our team, parks, transportation, both have kind of pretty great customer service folks. And I think, ultimately, if somebody gets to the wrong person, I think our staff work pretty hard to help connect people where they need to be connected. Again, I think that's a temporary state of being, and hopefully as we're really leaning into there, I think as the council also knows, there's some usability testing happening of the RaleighNC.gov to make sure that information is as clear and synthesized as possible, and that will partner really with the efforts to develop the CRM. So ultimately, I do think See-Click-Fix is a pretty short-term, easy path, and ultimately, I don't know, Steve, Charles, do you have anything else to add? I will say our solid waste works together with Raleigh Water, so that's a joint customer call center. So I think in doubt, they certainly have a great customer service ability to generate tickets and make referrals. Charles, do you have something to add?
Yep, I just wanted to add, our community centers are also available as patrons are out visiting our spaces and they see something and they want to go inside and report it to a community center director or staff. They'll be sure to send that information to our maintenance team to get it out, even if it's not within parks, but if we need to partner with transportation, as long as it's identified and shared or give us an idea where it's located, we could send staff to figure out next steps.
I also had a question about whether there's consideration for reopening the facility at JC Park, or are we operating under the idea that that's not going to reopen at any time?
It is not the city's plan to reopen that. I know there are conversations. Stephen Bentley, unfortunately, is traveling and unable to attend today. I know that the Parks Department is having discussions about the highest and best uses of the areas that used to be occupied. But at this point, the city is not making plans to restore that convenience site.
Okay, got it. And then I was just wondering, and I don't know who can speak to this best, but what sort of like root cause analyses have been done? I mean, when people are illegally dumping, something prevented them from doing the right thing. A lot of things might have been the preventive point, but like why didn't those people get it to the right place? Was it limitation of hours, confusion of where it should have gone? Their load was too mixed. I mean, we have free bulky load collection. I think you can get it for free every 90 days. Is that right, Stan? Every 90 days? Yeah, and I do that all the time when I have all sorts of junk. I just put it out and y'all come on my same trash day. So I guess when I see illegal dumping, I'm just asking myself, like, why is this happening? And I wonder if y'all have done any sort of quantitative analysis of why this is happening.
So I think the answer is no. I'll invite maybe Stan as probably the most informed in terms of broader studies that have been done. I do know anecdotally, as we were preparing for this presentation, there was some discussion about the nature of the materials that consistently across the departments they see in illegal dumping. And I think there is a feeling amongst those some of the materials that I think all of the departments see are those materials that aren't accepted in some of the typical pieces, or potentially may be coming from kinds of commercial businesses or other kinds of that don't receive city services and are required privately to pay for disposal services. But Stan, you're probably more familiar with literature just generally about some of the drivers behind dumping, and some of that may parallel to some of the experience and feedback of the impacted departments.
Yeah, I think that Councilwoman Patton's point about do people have what they need to do the right thing? I think we focus on that every day, and we continue to step up our game to reach as many people as we can, to let them know of our resources and make things easy for them to do. And glad we got that app going, because that's the next phase of it. What I will say, in my experience, both in the public and private sector, it seems like the common denominator a lot of the times are costs. And so whether it's the cost of only having 2 hazardous sites that you can take your tires to, or a small business can take tires that they changed out to and not have to pay someone to come in to actually recycle it. And if it's too far away, maybe they'll find one of those dead-end streets that Charles was talking about. The other cost, I think, is, when you think about schools and multifamily move-ins and move-outs, there's a significant cost with all those mattresses and, old furnitures, apartments, those sort of things that people just, they really don't want to take it on, and have a perception that maybe that's the city's responsibility to dispose of those type things. But in my experience, that's what I've seen, is that people are trying to avoid travel, time, and money. And so this is the easy thing to do.
Okay, thanks.
I want to ensure that we move on to our next agenda item by 4 o'clock, but I also want to ensure that we are summarizing our thoughts to return to council. So I've got 3 thoughts here that I want to just note, and then I want to see if there's any others that I've missed. I would like to just make it known to council that there is, I think, still an ongoing need for education and marketing around litter prevention, whether it's illegal dumping or, just not throwing trash out your window, things like that. Where does the trash end up? And so that's one question. And I started thinking about the kiosks downtown and just other ways that we can start integrating these messages, through various departments. And then one thing I think still is just this concern, to what you were saying just now, Stan, it's about cost, it's about time, it's about distance to make it easy for folks. And so I would like to also just put it out there that, we don't have some of these services now in our central Raleigh area for convenience centers. And so I'm just curious, are there going to be any plans, for some future site? Maybe it's not JC Park, but how are we thinking about replacing that site, as well as the one that was at the private Triangle Restore. Do we have any plans for that? I think that's worth bringing back to council. Anything else, Councilmember Branch or Patton?
I would just say it's probably worth further investigation on some of those root cause analyses. I don't know the best platform, but staff would be better to brainstorm on it. But I think about that community satisfaction survey that we send out, and maybe it's like, if you've ever illegally dumped, why did you do it? I think about myself, like I've sometimes gone to a thrift shop and it closed at 6 and I got there at 6:30. I'm like, but this is the day I could come here. So it might be useful to get a little bit more of a clear picture so that we don't extend hours if the real thing is distance, or the real barrier is distance, or vice versa.
And I was going to say, too, if staff can pull the data of when they see probably the bulk of increased illegal dumping, and then maybe what we do is, have a program, a pop-up or something, instead of just saying one central location, but maybe have some type of pop-ups that happen maybe in the spring or in the fall, things when we know like kids are moving in for college or kids are moving out of college and things of that nature. I think maybe a pop-up may be a little more efficient than a site that's year-round, only because if we're not going to man it, I don't think we're going to fix the problem. So then we have a staffing situation that we have to make sure we put in place. So that would be my main thing is if council at some point asks or if staff comes back and says, we're going to have a new site, I think it has to be manned. With some type of personnel in order to at least try to cut down on some of, maybe not cut it out, but at least cut down on some of the illegal materials. And we haven't even talked about, and I ran into the new owner of East Coast Towing, we haven't even talked about electrical vehicles and those batteries. And that's a conversation I'm going to bring up at a council meeting on Tuesday.
Great, thank you. Tansy, is that enough direction for what we're bringing back?
I believe so. If I can try to synthesize that together potentially in terms of a report out, it sounds like potentially the committee could request that the staff prepare a report for the full council that identifies education and outreach opportunities, identifies any existing research or other data collection methodologies to better understand illegal dumping causes, and to identify options and alternatives for centralized convenience collection as a replacement for JC. So it'd be a report that would do those three things.
Correct. Yeah, thank you.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that was unanimous. Thank you. All right, so we are going to move on to our second agenda item. I have a feeling a lot of folks are here for this. I'm guessing your green color is representative, perhaps, of something related that we're going to talk about. We do have a presentation from staff first, and then I know that there's a number of folks from the public that also want to speak about tree protection and planting in the city. I just want to first, could you raise your hand if you were planning to speak? Because that will help us figure out how many minutes each person can have. So just please keep your hand raised so I can count. You've got 7, 4, 5. There's the last hand. 8. Okay. And you got...
Are you looking for clarification, ma'am?
I am. So is that for public speaking or the presenter?
So everyone is the same because, the public, we're going to have the same amount of time for everybody. But let's see, you said 8? Okay. So I think 3 minutes apiece is the max that we can do. And because this presentation will take a little bit. So I just want to get everyone kind of prepared that that's about how long you'll have. And you're welcome to not use all that time. But I want to ensure that there is some time also for council to have discussion. So without further ado, we will turn it to staff and then the public.
So we have Zach Manor, who's the city's arborist here representing Parks, Recreation, Cultural Resources. We also do have staff in the audience from Planning and Development. Particularly, we've got resources from our zoning enforcement functions. And I do want to clarify, because I know there's a lot of interest in trees in Raleigh, and so the focus of this presentation really are on the operational aspects and the planning aspects of our parks works with trees. Zach will speak to some degree about the regulatory framework under which he operates, but for the most part, we won't be focused on any kind of regulatory reform in today's presentation, knowing that the council is discussing that in other forums.
Thanks. Good afternoon, council members. Thanks, Tansy. Zach Manor, Raleigh Parks. All right, talk a little bit about our urban forestry division. So Raleigh Parks falls under the Parks and Natural Resources division within the Parks Department. We have three main functions. We do development, so that's plan review, inspections, and permitting. We do code enforcement, so that's city rights-of-way, city property, and tree conservation violations. And then we have an operations arm, so that's our tree maintenance, inspections, permitting, and planting. So what we're talking about today are city trees. So think about a tree. The city code defines a city tree as a tree that has its trunk located entirely or in part of city-owned or city-controlled property, including any boundary trees. So thinking about street trees, park trees, greenway trees, trees on city property. Those are what we will be talking mainly about today. So thinking about in the city of Raleigh, there are streets maintained by the city, as we heard from the previous presentation, streets maintained by the state, and then streets that are private. So our jurisdiction is limited to city streets and in certain state road locations where we may have an agreement or have constructed some infrastructure. So multiple groups managing the asset throughout the city. So our operations function, so the Ps, pruning, planting, permitting, removal, inspections. We do storm response, contract management, and education. A little bit of wildlife as well. As you can see the picture here, there was a large honeybee nest found in that tree that fell across the road. So we were able to reach out to some folks with the Wake County Beekeepers Association to come out and rehome those folks. So we get the occasional owl or eagle assist. So it isn't all just trees, but stuff in trees. Inspections, so that's citizen requests for the most part. So thinking about tree protection fence, tree planting inspections. We do health evaluations, tree risk assessments. We also look for clearance impact assessments and utility impacts. As a tree that grows in the right of way, so think about between the curb and the sidewalk, there's a lot of other stuff going on in that same place. So we have a lot of interaction. So as being the part of the living infrastructure, sometimes we need to make adjustments based on what's there, what's coming. Tree planting. So we run in the city of Raleigh a tree planting window. So from October 1st to April 30th, we allow trees to be installed in the right of way or city-owned and controlled property. Typically, that tries to line up with the life cycle of the plant. So placing a tree without leaf on concentrates root growth, so that's what we shoot for. To allow some flexibility for planting, we extend it for half the year, so that's why we go for 6 months. So during our last planting season, so that would have been October 23 to April of 2024, 2,533 trees were installed through new development or required tree replacement. We planted 350 trees as part of our street tree equity project. We planted 189 trees with volunteers, so that could be neighborhoods, parks, greenways, city properties, and then 42 honor trees. So that's a program we run for folks that can honor loved ones, pets, by planting a tree on a city facility. So when we get planting, sort of the where, what, and why, a lot of it comes into, you hear location, location, location. As I spoke earlier, with all those things that are occurring in the same place, it's getting more difficult to plant a tree in a lot of places just because of all the existing infrastructure. So we really want to focus on the right tree in the right place. Planting a tree that can allow to grow and mainly maintain its form over time is beneficial. And so putting a tree that's too big or too small in the location, we can't maximize the benefits that those trees provide. So prioritization, so a lot of what we do as part of our planting comes to replacing required trees. So thinking about downtown, development required trees, trees in historic districts that are basically required by code to be replaced. And then we look at opportunities for planting and increasing the canopy outside of that, whether it's a citizen request, an open spot in front of a city facility. We have a lot of options for where these trees can kind of go. We have a request form online. If a citizen, a neighborhood is looking for a tree, we can work with them to make sure they get a tree, whether it's something planted by a contractor, or if there's enough in the area, we can do volunteer projects. So that could be in a street tree, a park, or on the greenway. Species, so we like variety, much like with people. The more varied the diversity of your population, the healthier it is. So that's both in age and in species type. So small trees, young trees, old trees. We plant a mix of native and non-native trees. So looking for that large amount of diversity really helps us when we encounter pests. So whether it be a disease, temperature change, or specific insect that decimates one kind of tree, the more opportunities and trees we have, the more overall healthy our urban forest is. Thinking about size, talking again about the right tree in the right place, you need to have at least 3.5 foot of a planting strip for us to install a tree. Anything smaller than that, you're in the sidewalk, you're in the road, it's pretty limited what you can install. In a 3.5 foot planting strip, we're going to typically plant a small maturing species, so think like a dogwood, redbud, something like that. It's not going to get too big. It's also under power lines. In those cases, when we have limited room, we have less other infrastructure interaction. Benefits as well, so when we kind of take a look at a view on equity and environmental benefit, where can that tree help us out, whether it's improving heat islands, stormwater, air pollution in general, just shade or physical beauty. So trying to find something that fits for the location. Speaking a little bit about the benefits, sometimes it takes a tree a little while to start delivering some of those significant benefits, but starting and working through the process. And like I said earlier, replacement is a pretty big piece. Tree protection. So we have multiple tree protection tree protection details. So TPP, tree planting, so that's number 1 and number 2. We identify our tree protection based on a critical root zone. So that's 1.25 feet per inch of tree diameter. So a 10-inch tree would have a 12.5 foot radius, and that's where we establish tree protection. So in cases where that tree protection is limited or significant disturbance, that's a big key for us to use to help make determinations on whether a tree stays or goes. Root disturbance is another big piece, so thinking about how much of that area is being disturbed by whatever the activity is or due to damage. Those help us sort of make determinations about cases where trees stay or go. Leads us kind of into tree removal, city trees, utility infrastructure contracts or conflicts. We've got a lot of 6-foot willow oaks and 3-foot planting strips around town. And we get to some places where it makes the sidewalk impassable, where we can't function. So in a lot of those cases, we'll have to remove some of those trees. Trees under power lines, everybody's seen the YMCA trees, right? We look at health and safety. So is the tree a threat to fail, to fall? Trees, there's fast death and slow deaths. Fast death is what we're trying to avoid. We like the slow, kind of take it easy. We don't want stuff falling over. We also lose a lot of trees to storms, whether that be the tree itself fails as part of the storm or as a significant defect as a result, which requires that tree to remove. Development, construction, so impacts on existing trees result in us not wanting it to be a health and safety issue and trying to prevent that, so that remove a lot of trees on those. So we have to make a lot of calls as we look at these trees individually, whether we retain versus remove or replace. We also remove some trees that probably shouldn't be where they were in the first place. Those don't necessarily need to be replaced. So some of the ongoing projects, as you can see, this is some interaction we're having between a willow oak and some sidewalk. So we've worked with our partners around the city to try to find some ways to replace the sidewalk and maintain the tree. So whether that be some root shaving, alternative sidewalk pieces, differences in construction practices, so we're actively trying to preserve when possible. We do a lot of contractual services that help supplement city staff work, whether that be tree removals, tree pruning, tree planting is a big one that we use. We're typically inventorying, so as we get a request to review a tree, we'll add that to our street tree inventory, well, actually, city tree inventory. There's a version on our open source data where you can go and look at all the trees we've inventoried. Electrification, so working electric saws, electric blowers, things like that, adding to become more green while taking care of the green. Green stormwater infrastructure projects, being able to plant in some GSI devices or stormwater structures in the right-of-way. And then city development. We add a lot of trees through city project development. Another big one is our street tree equity project. So we just finished the second year of planting. We've installed 750 of the 1,000 trees as part of the project. So it's a 3-year project based on environmental equity. So where were there street trees and where were we lacking? As part of that, we did a lot of education and outreach. We partnered with groups from housing and neighborhoods and community engagement to help get the word out. There's a big focus on heat island mitigation. We give citizens an option to have the tree in front of their property. So we send them a mailer, give them a choice of a couple species that would work in front of their property. They can respond yes, no, or not respond. If you respond yes or no response, we'll give you a tree. If you say no, we won't. That way we can get some volunteers. We're getting ready to start offering our year 3. Our hope is that some of the folks who said no the first time saw that the project is a good one and that they'll join up and go in the 3rd one. So as part of that, typically we're giving small maturing trees, large maturing trees, and then medium maturing trees, depending on what the right-of-way looks like in front of a particular property. Another big thing we did, Wake County canopy study. So overall, Raleigh has 50.5% canopy. That's the entirety of the planning jurisdiction. The value of the canopy provides us $630 million annually. That's about $1,058 per person. The study looked at the change from 2010 to 2020. Sorry, notes here. Stats page, sorry. So yeah, the change between 2010 and 2020, it ended up being about a 2% decrease in overall canopy. The map in the picture kind of shows the red areas, the green is gain through light green to yellow to red, which is a greater loss. So looking at a lot of where our tree loss was, a lot of it is kind of the downtown sector where things are developing. One of the other benefits that the canopy study provided was a planting prioritization map. So they provided opportunities to plant where a tree could be possibly installed to help work through to provide some benefits. So this map's a little hard to see, but it's sort of the color that lines up. So the largest, so it was rated very high through very low priority. That's basically a tree that, what kind of benefit will it provide? So the largest concentrations of very high or high planting prioritization were in the geographic east and southeast sections of Raleigh. So it's sort of that right side of the map. So these areas were assessed to have the greatest need of canopy to help mitigate the combined impacts of the urban heat islands, stormwater runoff, and social inequity. So that was based on a composite index that looked at the existing canopy percentage, the possible canopy percentage, heat island information, a social equity score of 300 plus. That's part of the Wake County Vulnerability Index, and that includes vulnerability, mental health, air quality, stormwater benefits, asthma prevalence, social, soil erosion, and FEMA floodplains. So they provided right around 500,000 planting sites. Now the reality of that is that they just kind of looked at it from above. So whether that's actually we won't actually be able to plant 500,000 trees, but it gives us some ideas to sort of highlight and work through a prioritization process. The other big one we've got is our Urban Forestry Equity Grant. So this is an IRA grant, runs 2024 to 2028. We just actually signed the contract recently, so we'll be getting some work on that shortly. So that's $1 million for pruning, planting, hazard tree removal in federally identified vulnerable sections of the community. We'll be including some volunteer planting projects and carrying on the work that we developed with the Street Tree Equity Project. The areas outlined there line up pretty well with what we've already done with the Street Tree Equity Project, as well as those high priority locations identified in the canopy study. So as we're sort of projects moving forward, working with our partners in transportation on the expansion of the tree grate replacement program downtown. So we're going to have some funding biannually to help repair some of those tree grates downtown, add the flexible pavement in place. We've also allocated $500,000 biannually to help us fund deferred tree maintenance and planting. That'll be kicking off in FY25 as well. We'll continue our community engagement and volunteer planting, focused on equity in the right-of-way, and then expanding opportunities to plant on city property. So looking longer term, future opportunities, why a lot of the folks have come today to sort of talk about what they're looking at. Working with our Parks, Recreation, and Greenway Advisory Board and their Sustainability, Wildlife, and Urban Trees Group to work on developing recommendations for future canopy improvements, develop recommendations around planting, develop opportunities and education for citizens planting on private property, and help cultivate and develop relationships with nonprofits and community groups. My understanding is that the Parks, Recreation, and Greenway Advisory Board work plan will be on your agenda at the July 2nd meeting that covers some of this information. I know we've got a lot of folks that want to talk, but to kind of share a little bit of our existing resources. So that picture in the map is that open source data that has our inventoried trees in it. So you can click on a dot. Some of them are planting sites, some of them are trees themselves, but you can usually get some information on how big that tree is and what kind it is. Some of our resources include the City Tree Manual, which governs those city trees, our City Code, Unified Development Ordinance, Intergov portal, and open data. We work a lot with NC Extension, or the North Carolina Extension Gardeners Plant Toolbox. That's what we use to help make recommendations, provide citizens more information on specific trees and plants. And our website has a wealth of information. If you go to raleighnc.gov, search urban forestry, there's a lot of contacts. You can reach us, requests and information about tree planting, impact permits, possible street trees, selecting a street tree, tree service requests. So there's a couple videos starring me, so I apologize for quality or acting ability, but the information's good. So we try to provide opportunities when we can to educate. Any questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
Definitely, excuse me, definitely thank you for the information. Just 3 questions. First one is, once we plant a tree, how long is it before we go and kind of check on the survival of those trees?
So if a tree is planted by a contractor, we typically require them to maintain it for at least 1 to 2 years, depending on the contract. So that's an installation and a watering piece. When installed, we can usually do a little minor pruning to kind of head off any immediate questions. But typically after that, once that contract ends, this happens with development trees as well. The city sort of accepts the infrastructure, and then they're monitoring it moving forward. So typically after about 2 years, most trees have adapted enough, if they've made it that long, to expand, and then we'll work through occasional inspections based on inspectors in the area, projects, things along those lines. So we can't look at every tree all the time. So a lot of it comes from citizens, other departments, requests for issues and concerns.
Okay. My second question is, who works with our good friends that Duke Energy contracts out on determining how trees are pruned?
Well, that's us. We like to work with our partners. Ultimately, we both have jobs to do, so right. There's always challenges there. I think ultimately we have a pretty good relationship. Things don't always go as planned, but open dialogue and working through challenges. So that's something we monitor. We deal a lot there on complaint-based concerns.
Okay. And my last question is, with a lot of new development, a lot of underground cabling is taking place, and that's usually in between the road and the sidewalk. So, and that's usually where we want to plant street trees. So with this now and also I'm noticing even gas lines are being placed underground in that area. So is there any conversation working with development on the location of street trees as well as maybe some of the underground cabling and moving it maybe right on the other side of the sidewalk in order to still allow street trees?
Yeah, so as part of new development, there's a utility easement that comes with most projects. I don't want to speak for our transportation group, but typically that's the expectation of where most of those utilities will go. But that's in a new development scenario. A lot of our redevelopment, there's a lot of existing infrastructure, so we have to work around a lot of that. In some cases, it's possible to move a line. In other cases, it's possible to shift the tree. In some cases, you can't plant just because of existing. So we sort of have to take those as we go. The UDO sort of has a hierarchy for where those trees can be placed based on existing conditions. For just a general tree planting request, we'll go out, call 811, have them mark the site. We'll make some determinations based on what's there. A lot of our bigger utilities, I mean, we obviously don't want to plant on top of a water line but a lot of our utilities are fairly deep, and there isn't as much interaction. What we run into sometimes is conflict with repair in either case.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Zach. Appreciate that. I was curious if you could go back to the canopy study slide and you provided a value of the canopy, and I was curious how that is valued. How do you come to that number?
So this was part of the report that Davey Tree put together. So it's a combination of value from stormwater mitigation, carbon sequestration, air pollution removal are the main pieces. They can't really factor in aesthetics specifically, so a lot of that is based on environmental services benefit.
Got it, okay. And then do we have a goal, a citywide goal for how much canopy we retain?
No, there isn't a percentage base. We actually don't have a planting number goal either. So both of those could be opportunities or possibilities. It just kind of depends. What I would say is ultimately whatever you decide makes the most sense. Sometimes canopy percentages can be challenging just because of growth and how things are measured. Charlotte worked through something a few years ago that they sort of had some difficulty when they came back to remeasure, where it ended up looking worse.
Cool.
Sorry, at this time, you can't speak. We're going to have public next, though. Yeah, sorry. Anything else from council? Okay, great. Thank you so much, Zach. I appreciate this. This is now the time for public comment, and so I do have 4 speakers that requested to speak, so I want to make sure to have them first. And I also just want to say a big thank you to everybody who's part of the Oak Folk Collective that is here. This is a group that actually asked to have this discussion at committee, so y'all made this discussion possible. I see this as the beginning of a conversation, and I appreciate that Zach mentioned the Parks, Recreation, and Greenway Advisory Board. Their committee on sustainability, wildlife, and urban trees may be a really great place to continue this discussion, but at least this gives us kind of an initial forum to hear what you all are seeing. So much of our work as counselors is to understand what our residents are experiencing, and then to try to take, those concerns, those ideas, that potential, and bring it to the city. So I appreciate that y'all are here. The 4 speakers that had let me know they wanted to speak are Amy Etheridge with the Extension Master Gardener Program, Barb Fair with NC State Horticulture Science, also advisor to the North Carolina Urban Forest Council, Matt Farley, a certified arborist with Leaf and Limb, and then Maggie Bailey, founder and executive director of We Plant It Forward. And I don't know if you all want to go in that order. You're welcome to change that. You're welcome to all come up at the same time. It's going to be 3 minutes a person, so that's 12 minutes total. And if you want to kind of speak here and there, it's up to you. I'll leave it to you to decide. And then we'll go to everybody else who's requested to speak as well, including anyone who didn't raise their hand earlier. We'll try to get to you.
Hi, good afternoon. Hi. My name is Amy Etheridge, and I want to begin by thanking you for the opportunity for both the Oak Folk Collaborative representatives to speak, and also for the opportunity for so many people here today. I love seeing all this green. It's fabulous, but we really appreciate the opportunity to share what we're seeing in the community. So the Oak Folk Collaborative are a group of concerned residents who first came together about 6 months ago. Each person in this group having witnessed the devastating loss of tree canopy, of large tree canopy, and the fragmentation of habitat across various communities in Raleigh. As a group, we got up to speed with all the current elements of tree canopy, in particular, points of tree canopy preservation within the city. So we looked at the Raleigh Strategic Plan, we looked at the Community Climate Action Plan, and also the UDO. We also studied the Wake County Tree Canopy Assessment and the specific Raleigh report that was referenced in the staff presentation. So we're here today to ask the committee to bring forward 2 items to put before council. The first, we do want to acknowledge the recommendation from council last week to incentivize tree preservation with missing middle projects, I believe was how it was presented. We respectfully ask that thoughtful and intentional best practices and innovative ideas are informed by our status as the only biophilic city in the state of North Carolina. We ask that the proposed changes would apply across infill development and not be exclusive to the missing middle projects. Second, we ask, similar, and glad to see the support in the staff report, but we do ask for the existing Sustainability, Wildlife, and Urban Trees Committee to be tasked with drafting a tree canopy master plan for Raleigh. It's interesting to hear a lot about tree planting, but we didn't hear a lot about tree preservation. And so I think that's something that we are most interested in. So 3 other folks, I'm going to let you introduce yourselves because I see the clock ticking, but thank you again for the time to address this really important issue.
All right, well, thanks for everybody's time. I will try to keep this short and sweet, but my name's Matt Fraley. I am from Leaf and Limb. We're a local tree care and preservation company based out of Raleigh. So, when I see tree protection, I think that's what really speaks to me as a tree care and preservationist. So seeing a lot of issues firsthand is where I think, my insight of what I see and hear on a daily basis with residents of Raleigh, as well as some commercial clients of ours. The one thing is, I wish they could have done more to preserve that tree. And with mature trees, it's more than just, leaving a stand of trees and letting it fight off the battle of construction stress or site changes, you name it. So, we obviously know a lot of the benefits that trees do provide, but they are exponential once these trees reach maturity. So it is just an accelerated amount of benefits once it reaches that. So not only is it important to me, and by the sounds of it, many residents, to protect these mature trees, but also very thoughtful and smart choices on what it looks like before, after construction, before and after planting. soil and structure I look at as the two key ingredients for a recipe of success for these trees. And it doesn't have to be expensive, and it doesn't have to be something that we're doing alone. I think there's enough resources that are even outside of just staff where people could make some major changes with just a few small things. I'm going a little bit off script here, but I would say as Raleigh continues to develop, I do think we must create robust measures in the UDO that do prioritize the preservation of these mature trees, especially as the city of Oaks, and maintaining the character of what we have here to offer. It's something really special. I'm originally from the Northeast, but have been a resident here for years now, and it's something that is just so unique. So my ask is just to, well, first off, thank you for even entertaining this conversation, but to really consider strengthening the UDOs as we move forward through development.
Thank you, Matt.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Barb Fair from North Carolina State University, landscape extension specialist, and been a certified arborist for longer than some of you folks have been alive.
46 years?
Almost. Not quite. So there are countless research studies that focus on the environmental, economic, and social benefits of trees. The handout I've given you provides just a small glimpse into some of those facts. Trees benefit our daily life. They provide cool conditions for us to enjoy when the heat rises. They capture harmful pollutants to help us breathe better. They absorb and slow precipitation, protecting our soil and water. They add real economic value to our properties and our broader community economy. Trees help maintain our sense of place, our mental well-being, and our physical health. Plus, a diversity of well-selected tree species planted in the right places provide biodiversity, wildlife, food, and habitat, and make our communities more resilient to a changing climate. The research also shows, however, that many of these benefits are not fully realized. Why? Trees are often not considered a priority. Urban sites are not always created with trees in mind. We destroy the soil, limit the space they can grow in, and create conditions that are not conducive to a long, healthy life. Increasing the amount of impervious surfaces seals off the underlying soil and prevents precipitation from infiltrating. This can lead to soil losses on the surface, but can also lead to the increased water stress on the urban forest and ecosystems. This also affects the fertility of the soil, limiting its ability to support healthy, long-lived trees. Why is this so critical to consider? Because as the research illustrates, it is the larger trees that provide the greatest benefit. Planting trees is incredibly important, but protecting the soil and the trees that grow in it is also unbelievably important. A street planted with rows of 2 to 3 inch caliper trees is great, but it does not equitably replace even a dozen or more 20-plus inch diameter trees that were removed to make way for the development. So often, topsoil and organic matter are removed from a site to prepare for construction, but so infrequently is there a requirement to put that topsoil back. What took millions of years to create is destroyed within minutes. Without healthy soil, there is no life. We need to give those small trees every opportunity to get big, and we need to protect those big trees we already have. Raleigh has made great strides in this area, but more can be done to save the ever-declining tree canopy cover. Here are some ideas. Require that topsoil either remain on a development site for use when construction is complete, or that 4 inches of topsoil be incorporated back into the soil. Also, minimize soil compaction where possible. Maximize the amount of growing space for trees and other vegetation in urban areas. Minimize clearing of trees and other vegetation, paying particular attention to preserving significant individuals and groups of trees. 2 seconds. Use trees and other vegetation to create green streets that encourage water infiltration and route stormwater to bioretention devices for treatment. Preserve and increase the amount and width of urban forest buffers throughout the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fair.
Oh, I'm sorry. Pardon me?
May I have your statement, please?
Oh, okay.
Good afternoon. Time and time again, people come to me concerned about the loss of trees in Raleigh.
Oh, could you say your name first? Sorry.
Oh, I will say it.
Just for our
I'd like
clerk.
to, I will say it, I promise. So time and time again, people come to me concerned about the loss of trees in Raleigh. They say, Maggie, what can we do about so many trees being cut down today? Their angst is palpable. My name is Maggie Bailey. I'm the executive director of We Planet Forward, a local nonprofit that works to preserve and restore our tree canopy. I come here today to support the valuable work that our city's urban foresters and arborists already do to preserve and restore our tree canopy. I'm also here to say we need to do more. Raleigh residents want us to do more. We Planet Forward works with hundreds of volunteers a year, all who are eager to support this valuable work. The loss of trees far outweighs our efforts to preserve and restore by the city, by local nonprofits, and residents. The recent Wake County Tree Canopy Assessment report shows us the staggering loss of over 1,300 acres of tree canopy from 2010 to 2020. That canopy loss means 13,000 to 26,000 trees were cut down annually for 10 years. It's hard to imagine the size and scale of that. Let me try and help you. 1,300 acres lost equals about 978 football fields. Let that sink in. In one decade, 1,300 acres of tree canopy gone. 130,000 trees gone. Beyond the numbers, we need to remember we are a part of nature. I invite you to remember how you connect with trees every day. Perhaps when you're walking down the sidewalk and you come under the shade of a tree and you feel the respite, comfort, and protection in its shade. Now's the time to act. And we ask, as Amy had said, for the 2 requests. City Council do not have to do this alone. The residents here today, local nonprofits, and all of the speakers are ready to help.
Good. Thank you, Maggie. Appreciate it. For folks who also would like to speak, who haven't yet, could you raise your hand again? All right, so I'm gonna, I think, just start close. So whoever's the closest, just come up, and then whoever's next, be prepared. Thank you. And always say your name, full name, please. Thank you.
Thanks so much for the opportunity to speak. I'm Kate Dixon, and I live at 1316 Brooks Avenue in Raleigh. I'm a member of the Parks, Recreation, and Greenways Advisory Board, and I've recently been appointed to chair the board's Sustainability, Wildlife, and Urban Trees Committee, which has been mentioned several times today as a possible group to take the lead on developing a master plan for protecting and expanding Raleigh's tree canopy. I really appreciate and admire the park staff's interest in undertaking such a plan. Zach Manor is a great leader on this, as are so many of the other staff. And I have been pleased to learn that Parks Board members are also eager to participate. Writing such a master plan will be a challenging project, but one that is so important for Raleigh's quality of life. And I'm excited to take it on if you decide to delegate it to the Sustainability, Wildlife, and Urban Trees Committee. My background includes almost 30 years as executive director of conservation nonprofits, including Friends of the Mountains to Sea Trail and Triangle Land Conservancy, so I have some experience in plan development. If the Sustainability, Wildlife, and Urban Trees Committee does take this on, I know that we will need help not only from park staff, but also staff from planning, sustainability, and stormwater departments. So I hope the City Council would be open to that if you decide to go in this direction. I also know that we will need advice from Raleigh residents beyond just the members of the Parks Board. We are eager to reach out for help and ideas from the community. There is so much experience and passion in this great city. Since the City Council voted last Tuesday, and thank you so much, to ask the Planning Department to look at potential text changes in the UDO to address tree protection and planting on land that is being developed, I would not envision that recommendations for changes to the UDO would be the primary focus of the tree canopy master plan. That process will be ongoing, and I know that many residents will want to share their ideas. I would envision a tree canopy master plan focusing primarily on what the city can do in two areas: planting and protecting trees on its own land and right-of-way, and educating and encouraging residents to plant and care for trees at their own homes and businesses. If we learn of strategies to protect trees on properties being developed, we would, of course, include them in recommendations. But I envision that the UDO review process would proceed forward on a different track while the plan gets underway. Several years ago, the Raleigh City Council directed staff to apply for the city to be a member of the International Network of Biophilic Cities. We made a commitment then to be a city where residents have rich contact with the flourishing natural world as an element of our daily life. Thank you for all the steps you are taking to make that commitment real.
Thank you, Kate. Next speaker.
Hi, I'm Sarah Pearson. I don't have any expertise in conservation. I'm just a resident who is concerned about tree loss. I live on Cheney Road in an older neighborhood in West Raleigh, right inside the Beltline. I chose that neighborhood because of its natural setting with many, many trees and wildlife habitat. Right now, across the street from me is a perfect example of what's happening around the city. 1.25 acres of trees have been cut. Every single one, including several large oaks. And all the topsoil has been removed. It's just this red clay. And I'm sure the topsoil is not coming back. In its place will be 7 houses. That habitat was for songbirds, deer, fox, rabbits, squirrels, raccoons, opossums, box turtles, and others. Before those trees were cut, I would come down into my neighborhood off of Kent Road and Western Boulevard. I'd drop down in that neighborhood and the temperature would drop significantly. Now, when I come down, it remains hot because the canopy is gone. And with more impervious surfaces to come, when they finish this project, it will be even hotter, and the stormwater runoff that has already been an issue for me in my yard will probably worsen. Not only did they cut every tree, which is allowed now by the city, they cut 4 to 6 feet deep right up to the adjacent neighbor's property where large trees grow. They drove back and forth over that same area with heavy equipment right up to that property line. I spoke with an arborist who said it would not be surprising for those trees to die or at least become unstable with strong winds because of the damage done to the root systems. If this happens, the owner next door to the development will face huge expenses and damages caused by fallen trees. Well, the developer walks away. And the city must allow that to happen, that kind of work right up next to the property line of someone next door. I understand that Raleigh needs more high housing. I really get that. But it's possible to have reasonable, rational development without total destruction of the environment. I have lived in places where I've seen it done, and there are even communities near here that do that. I just implore the city to create protection ordinances to mitigate climate change. Now, and stop the loss of habitat for our wild neighbors, and to protect the properties of people who live next door to development. And thank you so much for allowing me to come here to speak.
Thank you, Sarah.
I appreciate it.
All right. Next speaker, Marcia.
Hello, I'm Marcia Presnell-Jeanette, and I live on Stacy Street. And I have spoken to all of you at various times about trees. So it's one of the things I most like to talk about and do worry about. So I am delighted with the relationships that I've developed while being on the Parks Board with staff. I just cycled off, so I was the chairperson of the SWAT committee when it was first established. And through that committee, we moved Raleigh to join the network of biophilic cities, as others have mentioned. At that time, I asked for Raleigh to have a tree board, tree conservation group or something, and staff told me that wasn't going to happen, that the SWAT committee would do that work. So now it looks like there's the time for it to happen. But it really is of great concern that we're losing so many trees and we're seeing so much built structures that don't have green infrastructure. We don't see these built new tall buildings with rooftop gardens or planters that have green to help buffer the heat. And I hope that there will be some creative thinking about addressing that with these new buildings that are in our future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hello, my name is David.
A full name, please.
My name is David Newselder. I'm a certified arborist. Please forgive my outburst a second ago. I feel like a Baptist at a liquor store. This is my first time. I'm actually a little activated because I have to get back to work. I kind of snuck out to get here. I work on a tree crew, and it is dark. It is absolutely dark. These tree bosses buy a whole bunch of machines, and they have to pay those machines off, so they're just doing removals after removals after removals. But it's a better business model to take care of trees because economically, despite organically and holistically, is because you're killing your customers. And with tree maintenance, it's a much better business model, despite just being the right thing to do. So I just want to share my observations from traveling, and that is in Colorado, there is a tree registry. It registers all the important trees. It's called a champions list, and those trees have personalities. And in Costa Rica, where every single tree you have to apply to tear it down. It can't just be at a whim. So these are my ideas. Thanks for hearing me. I'm going to race out. I've got some more sweating to do. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Next speaker, please.
I'm Tim Martin. It's a pleasure to go behind somebody who just mentioned economics, because everybody in this room cares so much about getting us all home safely with integrity. But in fact, we can't get there from here because our economy cannot afford health and safety. And by that I mean, when GDP was first invented by Simon Kuznets for the Congress to solve the problem of not having another recession in the 30s, he warned them not to use GDP as a measure of well-being. But here we are today. All the systems that we require for Earth's safety and well-being, called the planetary boundaries, are being broken as we speak. We're up to 6 out of the 9 planetary boundaries. And that can be learned about in a movie called Breaking Boundaries, The Science of Our Planet. And the wonderful thing about knowing the big picture about the health and safety of what gives us stable growing seasons, oxygen and fresh water and healthy food to eat, is that we don't really quantify in our economy, except for if you've commercialized like water or something. Like, why is it that fresh food from down the street costs more than food on the grocery store that comes from across the seas? It's our economy. Well, it turns out the planetary boundaries go into the donut economics model, and it is something that basically reorganizes the economy to work for everyone, leaves nobody out, and fits within the planetary boundaries. So if I could pass this around, maybe you could take a picture and learn some more about that. And as an example, I'll just say what got me off the sofa for the first time was the Bud Lee project at the corner of Lakewood, I think, in Oberlin, where 25 acres was clear-cut, over 100 highly ecologically productive. All the benefits that we heard today. The biggest tree had an 8-foot diameter, and the smallest maybe 2 foot, but they were all clear-cut. And when we looked at the code, it turns out that it was full of loopholes. And when we asked, for all the great work that's being done here, when push comes to shove, we learned what? That state government will push back on the city government if we start getting in the way of development. And so we haven't had this much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere in 3 million to 33 million years. We are headed to hothouse Earth if we stop burning fossil fuels today.
Thank you very much.
In our children's lifetime.
Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Ian Burnett, and I'm actually here to talk about road safety and trees. So my request is for the city's transportation department to consider using trees for traffic calming measures. Essentially, this is turning a parking spot into a tree spot. And this may sound dangerous up front, but for slow streets, basically 35 miles per hour or less, it actually considerably improves safety by forcing drivers to pay attention. This also has the benefit of mitigating the urban heat island by directly shading the impervious surfaces that are heating up in the sun all day. And that can be combined with green stormwater infrastructure to also reduce runoff. This is sort of a forward idea, and you would have to probably do a study to see how the UDO would be modified, but this is an idea that could get a lot of things at once, including Raleigh's Vision Zero commitment. So that's what. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Anyone else from the public who wanted to speak? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi there. My name is Claire Fleurel. I live inside the Beltline off the Western Boulevard exit down the street from Sarah, close to Kentwood Park. A creek runs through our front yard. When we moved to Raleigh almost 35 years ago, Raleigh was the city of oaks. Now, Raleigh is the city of pavement and graffiti. And if you look at aerial views, you see red clay, and you see that going off into reservoirs that are our drinking water. There are so many benefits to trees, as have been mentioned. And when we moved to Raleigh, we thought, okay, we're in the last lot that hasn't been built out in our neighborhood, and we did what we could to preserve the trees around our house, and we planted more. Never did we expect that across the street from us, what was a house with backyard full of trees was now dump trucks of dirt being removed after the trees were cleared, and then now 6 houses. I know it's zoned R10. I think that was because it was close to the bus stop on the street that it faced, the original house. But in the guise of low-cost housing, a lot of trees are being lost. And
the houses that are being developed are $700,000 houses, so that's not really helping with the low-cost situation. Some other things, aside from development, that are affecting trees are kudzu, English ivy, and poison ivy. And I've seen all of this in my neighborhood. We never had kudzu until about 2 years ago, and that's going right down the stream into Kentwood Park. And I don't know which is the city property and which is ours, but perhaps that can be something that is looked at as well. And down our street, there's a lot of English ivy on trees that look like they're about ready to fall onto the power lines and in the street. So I don't know if that's a city's responsibility or the homeowner's property responsibility, but that's something that also I think needs to be on the radar. So in light of everything that has been said today, my heart drops every time I see a large tree felled. And it might not be, just be one tree, it's the whole lot, or multiple lots. Trees that have gotten their start decades or centuries ago, before all the pollution and chemicals and so forth. But that we need to keep that in mind and think about preserving them, because we're not going to get them back as easily as we have them now. So I'd like to quote Dr. Seuss from the Lorax. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. Please think of our trees and how that affects all of us. There's a value to that, a huge value, and we need to consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that we missed? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi there, my name is Sophie Cathario. I live on Wade Avenue. I wanted to just mention, many times I take the bus. I don't actually drive. And speaking of equity, a lot of people without a lot of resources take the buses. They often are just baked hot. There's no shelter of any kind, no place to sit. But if some trees, and we heard putting the right tree in the right place, I know with the right input, the right trees can be planted to make those places more comfortable and more humane and just more beautiful. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think we got everybody. Again, thank you so much for bringing your ideas. I'm going to open it back up to council for conversation, discussion. Do I see anything, Councilmember Branch?
Yeah, just, excuse me, a couple of things. And this kind of, I don't know who in staff would take this, but it goes back to the conversation about the tree canopy protection, the city as far as city property and private property. Because one of my things I always think about is we hear about trees being involved or impacted when someone is looking to develop the property. But outside of that, is there any regulations on property owners? I use an example. You have a community. We'll set aside and we'll say, hey, you have to save so many trees as you build out this community. Well, 2, 3, 4 years later, how do we know that those trees are still there?
So let me rephrase the question, and I do think this is a question that Zach Manor can answer. So the question is, if there's a tree that's required through development, does the city have a role in ensuring that that tree remains in place?
Remains post-development.
Okay, yeah. It's clear to you?
Yes. So there's a couple different groups that look at trees in the city. So urban forestry related to tree conservation areas or specific protected buffers. And then there's a group of trees the zoning folks are responsible for, partners in planning development, thinking like parking lot trees, screening trees, things along those lines. So both groups do have enforcement and authority for those required trees. It just depends which group specifically oversees a particular tree.
So I will provide context, like a lot of the enforcement responsibilities in the city, a lot of those activities are complaint driven. So when staff are notified that a tree has been removed inappropriately that was required through development, then we will do like we do a lot of the other enforcement actions. So people will be given notice, they'll give an opportunity to remediate the circumstance. So the enforcement cycle is very similar to other kinds of code enforcement.
And my other question is, there was an idea of parking, a tree for a parking spot. I'm sure DOT or NCDOT, if they're listening, probably all went in a trend. But can we speak to that on like requirements or right of way and line of sight?
Yeah, so there are some guidelines. I don't want to get too far out of my depth. I'm not an engineer with transportation, but there are certain state and federal guidelines around visibility. So speed of the road and position of the tree oftentimes dictate what's viable or not. So kind of depending, we have more flexibility in the city than, because we don't require state approval for the city maintained roads. State approval requires review. So if we're going to do something specific on a state road, the state engineer's office would review. So there is some potential depending on the type of road and what the build out would be, if that answers.
Yeah, that's helpful. And then the master plan conversation came up. Where like from, I guess, there's two parts I want to point. I know there's a part where a city can play a role, but also I'm aware, I know some residents, you spoke to the fact of how can we help? And one of the things I want to put out there is, and we can help make the connection if it needs to be made, but connecting you with the development community and having those conversations with them for the simple fact that some development communities and some developers statewide or not even locally, they have someone who lives downtown and they're always watching the policies and the things and the conversations that we're having when we're saying how we want to impact development or how we want to impact tree canopies. But I think if finding a way to have a safe and an open conversation, and maybe we can find ways to get to the end. The route we may take may not be the route we probably prefer to take, but I think the main thing is keeping the end point in mind. So I'm definitely willing to help make those connections to anyone there that may not have them, but I think it's worth us still having those conversations so that it's not just the city having those conversations with the developer community and with our friends and people in the General Assembly, but also the community having those conversations as well.
Councilmember Patton.
Yeah, thank you all for coming out. Really appreciate your investment in our community, and I'm glad that we're here starting the conversation. So I'll just list out some of the things that I heard as takeaways. The two that I heard are taking the current direction to staff, which is to come back with text change options for incentivizing tree preservation and missing middle, and making sure that's applying to all infill development. I could support that, adding that to the direction. And then tasking the SWAT subcommittee of the Parks Board to work on a tree master plan that does not address regulatory modifications, but instead provides guidance on adding trees to city properties and education for private property owners on their own private property. And I can support that, giving that direction to, or as we report this back to the full council. So I can support that as well. Other things we heard, the trees for traffic calming kind of pinged for me that I think the street design manual, do we have transportation staff in the room? Maybe not right now.
We do not have
Okay.
anybody here
So-
from transportation today.
I'll just say it into the air then, that's okay. I think the street design manual is being reassessed just sometime in the pipeline, and perhaps that could be considered and assessed for pros and cons during that process. And then trees at bus stops and shelters, love that. I think that folds nicely into the master plan considerations for city-owned property. And then one other thing I noted was that sort of addition of topsoil being retained or replaced on new development, which would be regulatory and so wouldn't be captured in the sort of mission put forward. So I just think that might be something for us to talk about as a council, whether getting more information on the implications of that. So that's what I got.
Just one thing, a request in the manager's update report, because my understanding is that NCDOT has modified some policies and they're in the process of removing a lot of trees from medians for a safety issue. Some of you may have noticed that if you drive down certain roads where you used to have trees in the median, along Capitol and other areas, they've started removing trees. So if we could just get an update on that and figure out, what's behind that. But that is something that I know I've heard recently. And if David, do you?
I've seen it, but I don't know what promulgated it.
Okay.
We can certainly communicate that with NCDOT and share information back to the council.
Yeah, I'm prepared to make 2 motions on these topics. Just before I do on those, I do want to note the trees for traffic calming. We see some landscaped, circles that, like on Hillsborough Street, and I know folks really enjoy those. There is an additional cost there, so I think it's kind of a trade-off issue about how fast we can move on our traffic calming needs. If we add landscaping to them, like trees, I think generally they serve a lot of benefits, but then there's a cost and a time lag. So that's, I think, the question to me. But I would like to bring that back just as something to note at our council meeting, as well as the idea for trees at bus shelters whenever that's possible for shade. I think that's huge. But my main motions, the first one would be to incentivize tree conservation beyond missing middle. So to bring that back to our council to say this is something that our committee believes we should be looking into. Do I have a second? All in favor? That's unanimous. And then the second motion is to recommend also that the Parks, Rec, and Greenway Advisory Board, Sustainability, Wildlife, and Urban Trees Committee work on a master plan for tree preservation and planting. One thing I want to add is I want to ensure that committee membership and input is reflective of our residents' expertise across the board, across the city, and that it also represents our city's demographics, so race, age, homeowners, renters, urban, suburban, rural residents, so that we've got a good mix that are providing that input. So that's my motion there.
Just for clarity, not to take any teeth out of that, but Councilor Patton mentioned something about making sure some things are non-regulatory. So we probably want to at least give them that initial direction, and then later maybe add some things, just keeping in mind some of the conversations that have happened with council.
Yeah, that sounds good. So add non-regulatory into that. Thank you. Do I have a second? All right. All in favor? And that is also unanimous. Are there any other comments from council at this time? Yep.
Just one. Sorry, I didn't fold this in earlier. My friends at Leaf and Limb, as this SWAT work is undertaken, I'm having a flashback moment right now where I actually called out your service. They have a well-wooded backyard. And I said they gave us a long list of all the things that should be done to make sure our trees last well into the future, and it came with a pretty hefty price tag as well. And so we are doing the naturalist approach to just sort of see what happens. But I think it might be important as you all do this work and educate private property owners on how they can preserve trees on their own properties, considering the equity, cost implications, and how we support homeowners who might find that the more budget-friendly option is the one they need to pursue, which might be tree removal sometimes. So just factoring in cost and equity when you're through your work.
Before I adjourn the meeting, I just want to invite anyone who'd like to, especially if you're wearing a green shirt, to come up front and we'll do a picture, because I just love that y'all are here and brought your energy and passion for trees. So if you don't mind, with our committee, we can do a picture. Tansy, do I have to do anything before adjourning here? Okay, with that, the meeting is adjourned.